Good morning, everyone. Buenos días a todos. Bienvenidos. Welcome back to the Health and Wellness Committee Wellness Wednesday Initiative. My name is Jacqueline Munguia. I am the Business Development Manager at Valley Baptist Health Systems, and it is my great pleasure to not only be a board member, but also one of the co-chairs of the Health and Wellness Committee of your local chamber to moderate this event and welcome you. Thank you for joining us today as we celebrate Men's Health Month. Please allow me to introduce my co-chair, Kendra Stein, chairwoman of the board for Healthy Communities here in Brownsville.
Good morning, everyone.
Wellness Wednesday is an initiative of the Brownsville Chamber of Commerce Health and Wellness Committee, where each month the committee features a select National Health Observances, highlighting important health issues that affect Americans every day. During the month of June, the Health and Wellness Committee has chosen to highlight the Men's Health Month. And the purpose of Men's Health Month is to heighten the awareness of preventable health problems and encourage early detection and treatment of disease among men and boys. This month gives healthcare providers, public policymakers, the media, and individuals an opportunity to encourage men and boys to seek regular medical advice and early treatment for disease and injury. This morning, I encourage you to take the opportunity to respectfully engage and ask our guest experts any questions pertaining to today's conversation through the Zoom chat or on Facebook Live comments section. Our first group of guest speakers this morning are from Friendship of Women, whose mission is to provide leadership and comprehensive services to empower and promote safety, health, and the overall well-being of adults and children impacted by family and sexual violence. They seek social change through advocacy, education, prevention, and provide a safe home for victims and their family. Today, we have the honor of hearing from Ruben Vasquez, MED, LPC from Friendship of Women, and also Efrain Garcia, also from Friendship of Women.
Hi, Ruben, can you hear us?
Yes. Do you want me to share my screen or for the PowerPoint?
I have your slides ready.
Oh, okay. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for welcoming me, Jacqueline. Like she said, I work with Friendship of Women alongside with Efrain. Today, I'll be speaking a little bit about domestic violence against men. If there's any questions, just let me know throughout or at the end. So I'll go ahead and get started with the first slide. So I believe it's important to know what domestic violence is. A lot of people may have an interpretation of it just being physical violence, but it's more than just that. It's a pattern of behaviors that one partner uses over another partner to maintain power and control. This can look like physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, verbal abuse, stalking, isolation, economic abuse, and there's also others. Most of the time it's a combination. It can be like, for example, sexual abuse and isolation and some economic abuse also, or it can be physical and stalking. It just depends on the situation. On the next slide, the cycle of violence is explained. I'm not going to go too much into detail into it, but what I do want to emphasize is how it works, and clients can be in different situations where in the focus will be the denial, because that's where the violence continues because of this denial from both the victim and also the abuser, which is, you know, they'll minimize the abuse, you know, maybe say like, I didn't really hit you that bad, or I didn't really hurt your feelings. Or in this case for men, it'll be more like, well, you know, you're a man, you should be able to take that kind of pain. You shouldn't even be crying about that, you know, those kind of things. It goes from a tension building phase, which is where the abuser is feeling a little bit more, you know, angry, maybe nitpicky. They may start putting down the victim. The victim would be more where they're trying to calm down the partner and trying to make everything they can to so they don't hit them or belittle them or say something, and that leads to the acute explosion where the abuser is where the abuse happens. It can be anything from verbal abuse, hitting, choking, rape, and the victim is trying to defend themselves here in this phase of the cycle where they either fight back, they leave, they try to calm the matter, maybe they lock themselves inside somewhere, bathroom, their room, to try to avoid the ongoing abuse. And from there, it goes back to the honeymoon where, the batterer, in this case, will beg for forgiveness. They'll say, I'll never do it again. I'll go to church, I'll go to counseling, I'll get the help I need. The victim on the other side would be more like, trying to attempt them to legal proceedings, okay, I'm not gonna press any charges because you did this to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and stay with you. On the next slide, it's the power and control wheel, which is, this one just explains a little bit more about what different things abusers use. And there's more than these. These are just more common ones. Most of the ones that are used against men would be the emotional abuse, I would say, the isolation as well, the minimizing. And the children is an important one because there's a lot of different men that are in relationships that are abusive because they have children. They don't want to lose their children. They feel like the children are going to get worse because of the abusive parent at home. They may feel like they need to be there. So they stay in the relationship because of that. And there's also economic abuse, controlling what they spend, how they spend, who they spend it with, those kind of things. So some of the statistics I found out from the CDC for 2018 mentioned that about 1 in 10 men are victims of domestic violence. And I believe that's low. I think there's more. And there's certain reasons that I'll talk about a little bit about why I feel it's low. But these are relationships that happen in heterosexual and same-sex relationships. It states also that there's more instances of domestic violence that men are going through, and it happens to anybody, despite of age or occupation. So the reason I wanted to emphasize why domestic violence is not limited to violence is because there are certain types of abuses, for example, psychological and verbal abuse, which is where it can be anything from belittling the victim, in this case, the man, humiliating them in front of friends. Maybe you can have a wife hitting her husband in front of friends, but it's not just a playful hit. It's more of a really hitting them, and they're making fun of them in front of others. It also includes social media, and I feel like social media has increased this a lot over the years, and where they post certain things about them. They may harass them there. They may be trying to make others feel like he's the bad person. They can also take away car keys or medications, and they may try to control where the victim goes and who they see. And like I said, the money is another one, but also the false allegations about maybe some women can be towards their partner that's male. They can be more where they're telling their employer or friends or even social media, this person hits me, or this person doesn't love me, doesn't love the children. So that way they can make them seem like they're this horrible person. And like I mentioned earlier, the children is one of the reasons why they don't report the abuse. There's a lot of different effects of domestic violence on men. And I feel these are just some of the more common ones. PTSD, complex PTSD, depressive disorders, physical injuries, trust problems, suicide, drug abuse, codependency, low self-esteem, and problems with the relationships they have with their children. And this one, again, I emphasize because sometimes the abuser will tell their children certain things about their father, and then they'll see them as a negative parent figure maybe, and they'll lose those relationships that they're really craving because the children are also being manipulated and being told something about the father. One of the reasons that men don't leave abusive relationships is because ending a relationship in itself, it's already difficult as it is. So for many people that are not in abusive relationships, it's hard already. But when they're isolated from friends, family, maybe they're manipulated, controlled, either physically or emotionally, it makes it even more difficult. There's also a lack of resources, lack of understanding from friends and family. You know, I've heard stories where friends and family will make fun of them, and you know, you're not a man, you're weak, those kind of things. Legal obstacles as well. They may feel as if they won't get the children or they won't get any type of custody, so they fear that. And on the next slide, I mentioned a little bit more. They may deny the abuse. They may feel ashamed. Their culture may dictate that, you know, you stay with partner till, you know, you die, those kind of things. Stereotypes, you know, between how men and women should act, religious beliefs, fear of increase in abuse. They may feel like if they leave, they're going to get more stalking, or there be more financial abuse. They may still have feelings for their partners, which is a big one, where, you know, they may still love them and they don't want to leave them, and they hope that they will change, and they keep on holding on to that hope. They want to protect their children. Perception of services, that they may feel there's no services, there's no help for them out there, and also that the services are unhelpful, which a lot of men may feel like, well, you know, I don't think counseling can help me. It's not really going to do much, or going to get legal help is not going to help me. So why even bother? And this happens also with going to the doctor as well. You know, why should I even go? I'm not even sick. You know, I should toughen up. I'm a man, and I should be able to get over this. So COVID-19 makes it a little bit more difficult in this, if there's any men in domestic violence situations, because it's just used as another way to control partners. You know, it can be where they withhold items such as hand sanitizer, disinfectants, masks, or gloves, and they may make up stuff about the virus, and they already can't go out as much, so they're going to be spending more time with their abusive partners, which is only going to increase the abuse. So they can also withhold insurance cards. You know, if they feel like they're sick, they may blame it on them, you know, and start telling them that it's their fault, and that they don't want them there anymore, that they have to move out. They may feel like helpless because they feel like they're never going to win. And so even if they have a safety plan that they want to leave, or they do want to leave, right now I know there's not a lot of movement going on in the community, not just here, you know, in the country. Most of them do want to leave, but they may feel like, well, I don't have transportation. I can't just go and get in an airplane and take off, or get in the bus and take off, because some of them don't have that vehicle. They share it with the partner. So also the support they lack from, once again, like shelters, they may be already full. The counseling centers may be full as well, and they may feel like there's just no help for them, and the courthouses as well. They can't fight a case for their children or for a protective order or anything of that nature. Um, so during this time, the abusive partner may feel more justified, and they'll escalate their isolation tactics. So if anybody knows of someone that's going through this, that's a male, it's important to know and to let them know that, you know, it's never too late to ask for help. There are professionals locally and nationally that will help in regards to, you know, legal advocacy, any shelter, housing, donations, counseling, education, and amongst other things. And locally, here in Brownsville, you can call Friends Through Women and Harlingen Family Crisis Center. Also in nationally, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, they're available by chat and it's all completely confidential. If you just want to speak to them, maybe they'll refer you out somewhere or they'll speak to you they didn't really specify when I called them, but they'll speak to you for an hour, more than an hour, 30 minutes, depending on the situation. There's also the National Center Against Domestic Violence, and also the CDC is a good resource to learn more about certain resources nationally and locally.
Thank you, Ruben, for your presentation. Again, my name is Efrain Garcia. I'm with Friendship of Women. I'm the current shelter manager here in Friendship of Women in Brownsville. And I'm gonna be talking about addressing triggers and anxiety during COVID-19. And I guess there is no exact, introduction of this pandemic, but we really have to recognize that in this times during this pandemic, it's kind of difficult to cope with the situation, to live with this situation on a daily basis, and knowing that this is really, really challenging for all of us. We assume that this has brought a lot of stress in the community, in all the people in the country, because we've been affected so hard because of the pandemic, and this is automatically creating a lot of stress. So we have to also be aware of that. We have to recognize that this is something that probably we've never experienced before. This is something new. We always talk about this new normal, this new reality, and we're trying to adapt to this as we move on, as we go on, under restrictions, under ordinances from the city, from the county, and everything. And we're learning as we go. So knowing that feeling stressed during these times, it is normal, and we have to focus a lot on so many aspects of ourselves, and I'm referring to behavioral, physical, and to our emotions, because we have to identify, for example, and I'm gonna be talking a little bit about our behavior. We have to be able to identify an increase or decrease in our energy, an increase in the impact, the way we eat, also in the humor, in the mood. Sometimes we are very irritable. We don't want to talk. We tend to express a lot of anger, and we have also trouble to relax. Those are signs that manifest in our behavior. And we really have to continue to pay attention to them to identify those signs and then later take action. Those manifestations also include crying, worrying excessively, wanting to be alone, for example, not being bothered, not being wanting to socialize, feeling a lot of stress. And another important point is blaming other people, for everything. I guess as human beings, we tend to always look at who's responsible for this. And that is something that we cannot control, but we can understand at the same time that we can control ourselves, and we have to focus on ourselves. Now, when we talk about the signs of stress in our physical, we start to identify that some of the signs are stomach aches, even diarrhea, a lot of headaches, other pains, losing appetite, or the opposite, eating too much, for example. That's another thing. Sweating, having chills, muscle twitches. So we have to really pay attention to those signs in our body. Now, going to emotions, sometimes we feel anxious or fearful, we are scared, because again, this is something new. This is something that we have never probably experienced. And we can even feel depressed or guilty or even angry because of this situation. If we can go to the next slide. So we really have to understand that this stress is normal to a certain point, but we really automatically, when we feel that stress, we automatically want to relieve that stress. So we really have to manage the stress in a very proper way, and we have to also keep things in perspective. We can also set limits on how much time we spend, looking at social media, looking at the news, because all this is causing a lot of news, a lot of information, a lot of content that we are processing in a very quick way, in a very fast way, and we tend to get caught up in it, and we continue with the content. So we have to learn to also to balance that, and to a certain point stop it, and we can focus on the other side on things in our lives that are going well and that we can absolutely control. Also, another important point is to get the facts. We tend to rely a lot on social media. We tend to rely a lot of what other people say, and we should focus only on the news that come from the local health department, from government agencies, or even from international organizations, because we tend to share and see a lot of content that is not official in social media. And that information, that content is also provoking that stress on us. Now, on the other point is also, keeping yourself healthy. And this is fundamental. We have to also remind ourselves that we have to eat healthy foods, drink water as well. We have to avoid excessive of caffeine, alcohol, not to use tobacco or illegal drugs. We have to get enough sleep. We have to really rest so that we can, function properly. Another activity to keep ourselves healthy is physical exercise. Now, because of the pandemic, for example, and I want to give just an example. I started running. I hated running before. Now I'm doing it, and I feel, you know, now that need for me to run every day for 15, 20 minutes, half an hour. But it's also a way for me to keep myself active and healthy and to focus on other things. It's time for me. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, use practical ways to relax. You know, we often, we can often do this by doing things that we know work for us. You know, as I mentioned, we can work out, we can, you know, go for a run, we can do any type of physical activities that we know that we like, that we know that, you know, that they serve on us in a way that we benefit from them, and that we focus on that thing as well. We can also use time off to relax. We can request days at work, you know, because again, we're going through something that we never, I at least I never imagined that I would go through this pandemic, and it's really really challenging, you know. So we really have to also pay attention to that side of us. We can use time off to relax with our family at home, do things at home, and also, you know, to talk about your feelings to your loved ones. There is always, you know, that that need to talk to someone, to talk to your family members about it, and you know, knowing that we're all in this together. If we can go to the next slide. Pay attention to your body, to your feelings, to your emotions, so that we can also recognize those early signs of stress and anxiety. You know, it is really important that we analyze ourselves, that we assess ourselves in a way when we start seeing, you know, that things are not going well, you know, inside of us, even and even physically, you know, emotionally, when we are, you know, the majority of the day, you know, in a negative mood or something like that, we have to start paying attention to that, and we really have to think and give time to ourselves to focus on other things. You know that feeling stressed, depressed, guilty during these times is normal. Again, remember that is normal, and this is going to be temporary. It might last, I don't know, maybe a year, 2 years, or 3 years, I don't know, but it's gonna be temporary. So we have to also consider that as well. And also, you know, we can connect with others about it. We can have some, you know, these dialogues, you know, with people that might be experiencing the same thing, and we can together, you know, communicate and have that dialogue to try to dialogue with that information. Okay, if we can go to the next slide. It is very important, and this is basically the core of my message today, that we have to know when to get help. You know, these situations can be very, very stressful, because again, this is something new, and we have to remind ourselves that we have to focus also on other things, that we cannot focus all the time in this pandemic, but we can also focus on other things. Now, we have to also consider that everyone reacts differently to these situations. So we're gonna have a lot of different opinions, a lot of different ideas, different beliefs. There might be people that they don't even believe in the pandemic. So we have to also consider that. But again, knowing that we cannot control that, knowing that we can, control ourselves, and also support, your family, your loved ones, so that we can know that we're in this together. And that's it for my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Ruben and Efrain, for the valuable information on a subject matter not so often spoken about. If you or someone you know are victims of domestic violence, please do not hesitate to reach out to the Friendship of Women. Our next expert will be also touching on a subject rarely spoken about, men's mental health. David Stein is a board member of the RGV chapter of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, also known as NAMI, whose mission is to provide advocacy, education, support, and public awareness so that all individuals and families affected by mental illness can build better lives. Please help us welcome David by giving us a like on Facebook or sending a hi on the Zoom chat. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Kendra and committee for inviting me to participate and share a little bit. My presentation won't be as structured as the presentation that you have just heard. And part of that is just my personality and my way to address mental illness. NAMI is the largest advocacy grassroots organization in our country. And it has over 25 years of experience in helping individuals and families with mental illness. The focus today that has been already presented very well about the male involvement with emotions and intellectual abilities and relationship is part of how the male gender functions in a stressful environment or in a crisis and trauma. My interest and my point that I want to share with you all about NAMI is that it is a lay-led educational organization as opposed to professional psychologists or psychiatrists. And that's one of the reasons why it is not so often heard about. It has been passed on within the communities where there are affiliates. The organization is organized in Texas in 9 regions. And in those regions, there's at least one affiliate or chapter of NAMI. And I'll just share with you a brief definition that NAMI uses for mental health. It's an illness and condition that affects a person's thinking, feeling, or mood. Such conditions may affect someone's ability to relate to others and function in the day-to-day experiences in their life. Each person will have different experiences, even people with the same diagnosis. Recovery, including meaningful roles in their social life, such as schools and work or job issues, are some of the areas that the dynamics of mental illness is displayed. The data that is understood that 1 in 5 adults experience mental illness, and 1 in 17 lives with a serious mental illness deals with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and chronic depression. So when I first was introduced to NAMI, I was very impressed about their offering educational classes for parents and for children of parents that are struggling with mental illness. And that is a tremendous resource and support within the communities. My reason that I got involved with NAMI, and it's one of the requirements, is that you yourself or a family member has to have some kind of symptoms or expression about mental illness. And I was a part of a family that my father had an aunt that was hospitalized in a residential program for at least the last half of her adult life. And she suffered from schizophrenia. And as a young boy, I was able to go with my parents and visit her in a psychiatric hospital. And sometimes we hear stories that are kind of bizarre and very critical about treatment. But back in the time that I was growing up, literally, people that had severe mental illnesses were in a padded room. And that was one of the traumatic experiences for me to deal with mental illness at an early age. The aspect of my family system dealing with it brought home to me when I become an adult the importance of looking at mental illness. My professional experience in dealing with mental illness was, some of you might know, and I haven't had a chance to explain, but I have a mental health background as a psychotherapist and family treatment clinics, but I'm also an ordained clergyman. And so I have wore two hats in my journey in this life, and I have a deep concern for people of addiction, and I want to just kind of piggyback on that issue about addiction, because mental illness for men is filtered through the cognitive part of their identity as a human being. And the distinction between the male gender and the opposite gender, the female, is that they filter their world understanding through their emotions. And so I have had some unique experiences of trying to help young couples relate to their differences and how they deal with stressful situations in their couple relationship or in their family with their children. The mental illness usually is displayed in children early, around in their adolescence, 13, 14, 15, and it usually is solidified in a diagnosis or chronic profile by the middle 20s as a young adult. So I want to share with you some of the emphasis that NAMI provides in the community as a community resource for mental illness. And that is the educational programs that they have. And they range from dealing with peer-to-peer for families that are dealing with mental illness of some type, and therefore the whole family, people that attend the groups or the educational classes for this understanding is very critical, because they don't want to exclude any member of the family that is dealing with mental illness. And that is also a dynamic of sometimes why mental illness is not identified in families, because it has to do with shame. Our religious and philosophical values as human beings in our culture tend to, as has already been mentioned, we deal a lot with denial, that this is really not happening to me or to my family. and what is really lived out. If we would only understand, and part of my experience working with individuals and family with mental illness, I try to make a parallel comparison about people that deal with diabetes. Because many families deal with diabetes, and in the Valley area here, I think it's pretty substantial that the percentage of diabetes is very prevalent and very strong. Maybe 75 or 80% of the population has to deal with that. So families have been touched with that kind of illness, but in like manner, the same applies for mental illness. Because like I related in my family of origin, my father's aunt had to deal with it. When I become a parent, then as a mate, my wife suffered with a lot of depression. She was never chronically depressed, or at least diagnosed as that, but she struggled with that off and on. And part of that was her identity of her family and society through her emotions. So we need to understand that the male gender lives to a great extent in denial about his identity. Our culture says that, he needs to be masculine and a warrior, which a lot of times is not really lived out, or at least not identified, even though there's a lot of violence in our culture. So I'm going to just continue just briefly that the professional help from therapists is needed, and NAMI will help make guidance or references to that kind of resources available. And another aspect of mental illness is how we deal with grief, and we all usually identify grief issues in conjunction with a death or a divorce in relationship, but it can even be more impacting on a person, even if they have to move from different locations. I served 30 years in the military chaplaincy, and a lot of my counseling with families was to deal with that kind of separation and transient lifestyle. And so I just share with you that NAMI, and please, you can go and look on the web. NAMI is www.nami.org. There's the national identity, and then there's the state. The state chapter of NAMI is located in Austin, Texas. And I, before moving to the Valley and retiring from the psychiatric hospital as the primary caregiver in the chaplaincy and pastoral care, I served on that board for almost 3 years. And so I am very happy to be able to connect with the chapter in McAllen. The director there is Irma Garcia. She's the executive director, and NAMI, irgv.org is basically the website and address that you can connect with NAMI locally. I have been serving about 2 months now on their board of directors, and I am volunteering to be the facilitator, which will start next month, I think on the second Tuesday in Brownsville. Thank you for allowing me to share a little bit of my journey. And if there's anything that we can do personally or professionally, I'd be glad to help.
Thank you so much, David, for providing this information to the community this morning. I think we're still waiting on our next and final speaker this morning, are we not?
I believe so.
Okay.
If you need, I can give you a quick quote from the president of Marriage and Family Therapy, from an article that I read this past week about our current pandemic issues. And we have, a lot of us are experiencing a sense of numbness with the restriction of travel and being able to go out and do the activities that we usually have been accustomed to doing. And he addresses this issue about being restricted. He says becoming numb as being isolated in our homes and in specific locations. He said that he has become aware that the key is simply caring. And he gives a quote about how we can care for one another. He says, caring is where there is a desire to help, and caring also allows pathology in sharing and healing and repairing the issues of mental illness. So I thought I would share that little extra piece, if you don't mind.
Hi, good morning, everyone. If the audience has any questions, please do not hesitate to use the chat feature on Zoom or leave a comment on our Facebook page. That way, our experts can go ahead and answer those questions for you. If you are on Zoom, you can use the Q&A, and that will allow you to do an anonymous question if you don't feel comfortable asking in public. Give us a couple of more minutes while we get our next speaker set up. Mr. Stein, we have a question on what type of meetings does NAMI offer support for?
Well, they primarily are wanting to provide educational understanding of the illness and the training on how to deal with the behavior. Two areas that impact an individual directly about mental illness is a biological, chemical kind of dynamic in the person, and then also the environment that the person is reared in. And those are the issues that most of the support groups address. And of course, the parents that come, or even the consumer of mental illness, for example, a child can also attend in the support group with them.
Thank you very much for answering that question.
Mm-hmm.
Our speaker is on the phone. We are just trying to get them set up. Give us a couple more minutes. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, again, please do not hesitate to use the Zoom chat or the Facebook Live comments.
I might add a little piece about adolescents that are dealing with mental illness. One of the issues that's pretty critical is they are pressured by their peers and often end up self-medicating with over-the-counter drugs. And that is really prevalent.
Can you all hear me? It's Dr. Espinosa.
Yes, give us one moment.
Okay,
sorry,
so I don't know why I can't get, I was able to log in earlier to see you guys on Zoom, but unfortunately it's just letting me do audio, it looks like, huh?
Okay. So as long as we can hear you, then we can go ahead and go with your presentation, if that is fine.
Yeah, that's fine. not a problem. So I'll just kind of introduce myself, give you a little bit of a background who I am and how I ended up in the Valley. So Manuel Espinosa, I'm originally from Colorado, and so I made my way all the way over to Texas in 2002, where I did my residency training in general surgery urology in 2002 to 2008 in Galveston at UTMB in Galveston. And while I was there, I met my wife, who now will be celebrating 15 years of marriage in July, is from Edinburgh, and she actually went to UTPA when it was UTPA and not UTRGV. And like all wise husbands, they follow their wife when they say, we're going to go to the Valley and we're going to stay there. So that's how I came to come to the Valley. But it's dear to my heart because the little town that I'm from in Colorado, the culture and people are basically the same. Obviously, the one thing I miss is the weather. I wasn't too keen on heat and humidity, but here we are. And it's been a blessing over the years to be here and to be able to serve the community. My wife and I actually live in Harlingen. I'm with Doctors Hospital Renaissance Urology Institute, which I've been with since the inception, which was 7 years ago. Been practicing urology for 12 years. And my interest has always been men's health. Was going to do a fellowship at Baylor before moving down. And it was specifically men's health and microsurgery. And so for me, this is something that's been dear to my heart, because what I feel is that the man is he's the household. That's the center. You know, as the man goes, the family goes, and as the family goes, the region will go, and on down the line, all the way to the nation. And so for us in urology, we get to deal with a lot of men's issues that manifest as physical, but a lot of times they're deeper than that. And just like I heard the gentleman speaking, identity, I 100% believe that there's an identity crisis, not only, I think, just with people in general, it's both men and women. You know, we've come to a point where men have to be strong, but yet they want to be, show their emotion, and then don't be too emotional, but be strong. And so at the end of the day, it's very difficult. Well, am I supposed to be strong? Am I supposed to be connected to my emotions? Am I not supposed to, what is it? And so that can kind of be confusing for a lot of the men. And so as a urologist, I see a lot of issues that will hit the men. And one of the big ones is low testosterone. And some of the manifestations of low testosterone is feeling, I think when we hear the word low testosterone, immediately the general public, or what most people would think, is they tie in sex and testosterone, and then that's the end of the story. But that's not true. I mean, it really plays a big role in who we are as men and our identity. And it's not saying we have to have high testosterone so we can be manly and be strong, although, that does play a role in there. But it's really what makes us, it's how we think. It's our brains are bathed early on with the testosterone. I mean, we can all think, any of us who have kids, we see little boys and little girls, and we see little boys do some things that little girls would never think of. Like, little boys will say, you know what, I wonder if it'd be a good idea to jump from here to there. And, girls just don't think that way. But partly it's because that's part of our brains that eventually will have the surge of the testosterone. And so when we start talking to patients, and I start talking to patients about what it is to have those symptoms of low testosterone, and they're the following: if you have decreased energy, decreased concentration, irritability, difficulty with sleep, a difficulty not only getting to sleep, but maintaining deep, restful sleep so that they can wake up and feel refreshed and ready to go for the next day. And the other is obviously the decreased libido and that kind of thing. But a lot of times men will not seek help because they just think, well, we're just got to be mentally strong and push through, and I just got to keep going. But at some point, it gets to a point where they just can't do that anymore, and they become frustrated, and they start taking the frustrations out on the family, or they're so tired that they can't enjoy the kids. They can't do the physical activities that they would like to, and so their quality of life will go down. And so I just, really try to make the men, when they come in to see me, to make them feel comfortable. A lot of times, one of the things that men will think is that they're the only ones that have, a lot of times we'll do this just in general. Patients will think, they're the only ones that have that problem. But I really set them at ease to be able to tell them that they're not the only one. And 40% of men 40 and above will have some form of a decreased testosterone level. And, you know, with certain methods of treatment, first of all, I do a physical exam, do a really good history, and making sure that we get all the labs, and I get a very extensive lab profile on them. I almost act somewhat like a primary care, because a lot of times these gentlemen will not go to the family doctor. They will not get their regular checkups. And so I try to do as much as I can within my realm to be able to I've got them in the office. Let's get them looked at from head to toe for the most part. And because we want overall health, general health for the men, not just, you know, pigeonholing on testosterone and then that's it. Well, I want to know, you know, the rest of how's their heart, how's their lungs, how is the rest of their physical body doing. And if I can get them in, and get those labs done, I can really, you know, concentrate on those patients and not only help them, but if there's a problem, I can call up their primary, you know, family physician or somebody that they can go to and get them plugged in that way. So it's been pretty gratifying to be able to do that. And I've had story after story where, you know, there a lot of times men can't do the physical activities, even enjoying vacation, and you can do some nice supplementation with that in order to be able to kind of help them with this process. And so I don't just I basically have 7 pillars of wellness, and this goes for everybody. When we want wellness, and wellness is being able to not feel your stated chronologic age. It's not anti-aging, because we can't do, anti means without aging, and that is completely not possible. We all of our bodies are aging at a certain rate. There's certain things we're doing to hasten that, but there's also some really good things with education and helping patients that we can slow that process down. I call it aging gracefully, and that is being able to do and have the quality of life that you want at the stated age that you are. And so my 7 pillars that I go over with men are exercise, nutrition, stress management, sleep, supplementation, hormone optimization, and spirituality. And when I talk spirituality, I'm talking about prayer and meditation. And when I speak to them about meditation, it's not meditation to empty the mind, but to get the mind closer to that spiritual state, to where they understand that they're part of a larger, you know, process. I'm not shy about, you know, telling them and speaking to them, you know, even whatever people may think, you know, talking to them about God and how that plays a role. And you'll be so surprised that so many people are so open to that when you make it to a point where they can feel comfortable. And that's where we should be as healthcare professionals, whatever we play, because people are seeking. And if we don't help them fill that gap of where they're trying to fulfill something, most of the people will fulfill it with something that will cause an addiction. And it may be work, it may be alcohol, it may be whatever that may be, or maybe a substance, it may be whatever that is. And until they have joy, that's really what we're looking for. Some people will say they're seeking happiness, but the word happiness comes from the Scandinavian word happenstance, which is based off of your circumstance. So I tell my patients, why don't we look for joy rather than happiness? Because joy you can still have even in the midst of chaos, even basically what we're going through right now with the isolation and people having fear of what's going on. You know, if we really kind of understand who we are and have our immune systems up, then there's less likely that this thing is going to affect us as well. So that's pretty much what I try to do with the patients that come to see me. And it's just been very gratifying, and just hope to continue to help patients in this area be able to help and help them in their physical, but understanding that, you know, we're a body, we're a spirit being with the soul that is encased in a body, and we can't ignore one and it doesn't affect the other. So that's my approach, and that's pretty much about it. So I don't know if there's any questions or anything like that. I'm in the Brownsville area every Tuesday. Would love to help that community. We're just extending. Our whole model is to just help as many people as we possibly can within this area and this region of Texas, because there's amazing people here that have so much talent and purpose and ability that we can make a huge difference, not just in this region or state, but in the nation.
Thank you, Dr. Espinoza. We appreciate that. At this moment, does anyone have any questions or comments for Dr. Espinoza or for any of our speakers?
Dr. Espinoza, this is Jacqueline. I've got a real quick question. With the lack of focus and trouble sleeping and trying to stay asleep, along with the increased frustration, all the telltale signs of low testosterone, but especially during this pandemic time, how do men know that it's finally time to actually visit their doctor because it's low testosterone, instead of it just being either stress at work, stress at home, or it's because they've got too much on their plate? How do they know when it's time to actually finally go to see someone?
Yeah, so I always tell them if they don't have a family physician, they can come to me, but they can start at their family physician. And part of my profile is when I do a hormonal panel for labs, and from that portion of it, I always make sure that there's no other reasons for that from a physical standpoint, such as, you know, I check a thyroid level, I check a vitamin D level, I check a lipid panel. I take all these things into consideration to make sure that they also have those checked. And then during my intake, during my talk with them, is just listening and talking to them and understanding that those things may be on the plate, and that stress level right now is just added weight, and they're already low. And so they can't add any more weight to what they're trying to carry to begin with. And so for me, the biggest telltale is to get in and let us get the labs tell us a very good objective if it's just testosterone or is there something else. And so we work in combination with that. And with their PCP, I work a lot with the primary care doctor to make sure. So if a guy comes in and he has a thyroid function 10 that's completely off, but also may benefit from some testosterone, I make sure that I get that taken care of first before I start them on any type of replacement therapy, because I don't want to be doing two things at once. And so we want to make sure we got to be balanced. We got to make sure that we're not just saying, oh, it's always testosterone or it's not testosterone. We got to take each individual patient, and take their uniqueness and say, okay, we got to treat them individually. So that's pretty much what I do. If they're feeling like that, I would say get in with their family doc, and at the very least what they need, here's my recommendation. If they're going to go in and ask, they just need a certain test. They need two tests that will really kind of help them if they're not going to come in to see the urologist, and that is the total testosterone. But here's the one that's more important, and that is the percentage-free testosterone, because that's going to let them know how much of that total testosterone can be used by the body. So without going into details, there's testosterone is bound to another protein, and it's not used by or recognized by the body. And so some men will go in and they'll be told that their total testosterone level is completely normal, but in fact their low testosterone percentage free is low. So I see that a lot. If they go, I would say they can come in and see us. If they go to their physician and they feel those symptoms, have them run the labs. They can check those as well. So those are some pretty good starting points for us.
Thank you for that. Is it recommended for a man to go and see the urologist without his wife, because they may not want to open up freely that if she's there?
It kind of varies. It really does vary. A lot of times I haven't run into too much where they don't feel like they want to open up. a lot of times these men are getting to the point, most of the time when I see them, they're pretty desperate by the time they come to see me, because they still continue to have these symptoms, and they may have been to their primary care doc and been given different kinds of medication, still doesn't help. You know, same thing also with depression. It may mask as depression. And so for us as urologists, we got to make sure that it's not depression either from that standpoint, and their levels are good. But most men, I would say in general, have been pretty good about opening up by the time they come to the urologist. And I think that just comes from having exhausted all other options, and they're kind of on their last hope to try to feel better and be better.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions for any of our other specialists? We did have one question for Ruben and Efrain and even David. Are there any virtual support meetings for the Friendship of Women and also for NAMI?
Yeah, we at the board for NAMI, we're planning on approaching that pattern. We are kind of waiting to see what happens, you know, in July, if there's going to be any other openings to meet directly. But yeah, we've been discussing that and trying to work that out. You know, the issue is that we need to find a place or something where people can, you know, view the conversation and everything like we're doing today, because a lot of times they're not able to get that kind of facility. But yeah, we're planning on doing that.
And on behalf of Friendship of Women, currently we don't offer that, but we do have a batterers intervention prevention program for all males that are in have been abusing their partners, and that one's you can call us to get more information on that one, but we do offer one for that one for the batterers.
Okay. If there's no other questions for any of our experts and panelists, we would like to thank Ruben Vasquez and Efrain Garcia, David Stein and Dr. Espinosa for such an educational and wonderful presentation. We invite all of you to follow us on our social media platforms and join us at next month's Wellness Wednesday, scheduled for Wednesday, July 29th, so mark your calendars, to discuss Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. Finally, we couldn't possibly conclude this event without recognizing the support and the hard work of the Brownsville Chamber of Commerce staff and the Health and Wellness Committee co-chairs. Danielle Rodriguez is our Director of Marketing and Programs. Thank you so much, Danielle, for putting this together and helping us through this. And my co-chair, Kendra Stein. Thank you for joining us. This concludes our program. Have a great and blessed afternoon.
Thank you.